This is my fourth interview with RALPH BLUMENTHAL. Ralph was an award-winning reporter for the New York Times from 1964 to 2009, where he still contributes articles predominantly focused on UAP. He's written several books, including The Believer, Alien Encounters, Hard Science, and The Passion of John Mack. Today we primarily focus on the November 2024 UFO hearing that included testimony from Luis Elizondo, Tim Gallaudet, and others. Scroll into the description for timestamps, extra info, and useful links. And if you enjoy this video, please like, comment, and share. Thank you. Thank you so much for doing this with me again, Ralph. I really appreciate it. To start us off today, can you please summarize your thoughts or give your thoughts in a nutshell on the UFO hearing that took place a couple of days ago in November 2024?
Well, a lot of thoughts. First of all, we're entering a period with of great uncertainty with the new administration. We don't know what incoming President Trump will do on this issue. He said some things that indicate he's open to more transparency, but we just don't know. John Ratcliffe, who's up for a top post, has been pretty forthcoming in the past, surprisingly so, talking about UFOs, UAP. So he may be more open to discussing it, but we just don't know. Now, the hearing was very, very, very interesting. It covered a lot of ground. There's, of course, about it in more detail. And there were some interesting disclosures. It always leaves you a little bit unsatisfied because you want to know more. And of course, the public nature of the hearing ruled out discussion of things like material recoveries, alien biologics supposedly recovered, reverse engineering programs, all the important things can't be discussed in open hearing because of national security issues. But I found it quite fascinating, and again, it's overshadowed by so much else coming out in the news that it didn't get the attention it deserved. I mean, the New York Times apparently didn't cover it at all. So we'll go one by one on those issues, but I did find it quite interesting, and my partner in reporting, Leslie Kane, was actually there.
Okay, cool. Have you spoken to her since then? And has she told you?
Yeah, and she was, our discussions when we plan stories in the future are always private, but we found a lot there to follow up on.
Mm-hmm. Sure. Yeah, it definitely felt a little bit less satisfying than the previous hearing with Grusch, David Grusch. But that's to be expected, I suppose, considering the kind of claims.
Well, one important thing was that the counterpart of David Grusch, a whistleblower who supplied this report that Michael Shellenberger referred to, did not make an appearance. He or this person, let's say, has not been identified. We know a little bit about this person who authored the report that was entered into the congressional record. But Grusch was somebody to focus on.
Yeah.
And he testified, and he said some really startling things about recovery of biologics, material recoveries, that the government has possession of alien craft, things like that are really quite sensational. We didn't go that far in this hearing, but the report in itself was really fascinating. A discussion of a small portion of the hundreds of thousands of pieces of evidence that Michael Shellenberger, the intermediary, let's call him, who supplied this report from the whistleblower, said exist in government, coffers. So even the little glimpse we got of that information that he says exists, Shellenberger said exists from the report, were quite fascinating.
Yeah, definitely. And we'll circle back to that report a little bit later. Sometimes I'm going to say someone said, because I forgot the name or didn't make a note of it in time while I was watching, but someone in the hearing said that said government agencies have been unable to substantiate any of David Grusch's claims in or out of SCIFs. What do you do with that information? What do you make of that? Where does that leave us in regards to Grusch's claims? I'm not for a moment suggesting, oh, okay, it's all off, forget it. He lied about everything. That's clearly not where we are. But yeah, what do you do with that, and what do you make of that?
Well, I mean, one of the things that came out of the hearing this week was that the government has played a very disingenuous role over the years. They've lied about things. We know that. And there's a long history of misinformation and disinformation and, outright lying. So, when the government or the Pentagon spokesperson says that there's no information to substantiate Grusch's claims, first of all, very few people are read into these programs. Grusch was one of the few who was. The author of this report that was Immaculate Constellation that was cited at the hearing did have access, obviously, to very high-level confidential classified information. So the people who are denying this officially either don't know, they don't have the security clearance, or it's part of the long program of denying what is becoming increasingly clear is reliable information. Mm-hmm. So I don't put much stock in those denials.
No, me neither, to be quite frank. What do you make of Moskowitz saying some of them, like the people asking questions, were told not to ask the witnesses certain questions or about certain things? And I think somebody else said as well that like they were worried about asking about Immaculate Constellation because they were warned they might be put on a list or something like that. What do you make of this? And
that was very interesting. And Congresswoman Nancy Mace made a whole point of saying it again and again as if inviting retribution. She really was quite provocative on that score. There were several statements at the hearing that the government, the forces in the government, tried to derail the hearing, didn't want it to take place. And we know previously that when Congressman Burchett and Congresswoman Luna and others went looking for these UFO sites, they were put off, they were denied access, et cetera. So. It's all part of the same thing. The government, I mean, the people, forces in the government did not want this hearing. They, put in roadblocks. Again, more of the same.
Yeah. What do you think, if you were to kind of speculate a little bit, or based on anything you're aware of, they were told not to ask about? Do you think it was Immaculate Constellation, as simple as that, or do you think there was more to it?
Oh, it's part of the whole program of deny. I mean, and Lue Elizondo was asked, why? A good question. Why has the government taken this hostile adversary position against the increasingly clear reality of UFOs, which now that the government does acknowledge, and Lue has said openly many times they exist. So he was asked at the hearing, why has the government been so obfuscatory, or why have they
evasive.
denied so long? And he said, well, you got to go back to the Cold War. We didn't know we didn't want our adversaries knowing how much we knew. We certainly didn't want our adversaries knowing how vulnerable we are and how these nuclear sites could be transgressed by unknown objects again and again, and without our being able to identify them. So, I mean, some of that is reasonable. Military people are particularly concerned that we not advertise our vulnerabilities. Nobody in the government wants to admit that there are things out there that we don't know about, that we're just helpless against. So some of that is explainable. But the question remains, what would be wrong with acknowledging, at least without giving any national security information, acknowledging that there are objects that we cannot explain. We could have said that from the very beginning, and that it is a mystery left to be explained. I mean, that's so fundamental, and it doesn't give anything away. And other countries, I mean, our adversaries have experienced the same things. That's one of the things that came out in the Immaculate Constellation report, that Russia and China are experiencing the same things we're experiencing. So
Yeah. And I think he even mentioned in there that other foreign nations have tried shooting these things down and that kind of stuff, which was
they have
interesting.
exactly, and we've not been successful apparently in that. There've been incidents described in the literature of our jets trying to shoot these things down, and somehow it never seems to work.
Yeah, for, for various reasons. Were you already aware of the program, Immaculate Constellation, prior to anything published by Michael Shellenberger?
Well, Leslie and I knew that this was coming out,
Mm-hmm.
actually. We had a good tip, and we were pursuing it. We weren't able to get anything printed because of the short notice and a lot of secrecy around it. But we did know of Schellenberger, and we did know of the program and the report.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, not for long. We knew, a week or so before the
Got you.
hearing, and was scrambling to try to pull something together, but the time was just too short.
Yeah. And how many sources told you about that? Was it like just a single source, or did you have multiple sources confirming the veracity of
We
the
had more than
program?
one source. We had some sources in Congress. We had some sources with directly connected to the report. I don't want to go into too much detail there, but we knew basically what was coming in the hearing.
Yeah, yeah. And as you said, you had multiple sources. I'm not going to press you for more details, but you had multiple sources. They gave you the name of the program and everything like that, and everything lined up with everything that's been published
Right.
by
I mean,
Michael
I
Shellenberger.
want to be clear that we did not know about it outside of Michael Schellenberger's
Right. Okay.
reporting. So he really broke new ground with that, and
Mm-hmm.
he's to be commended for that.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, but once we knew the program through him, we were able to confirm through other sources that
Mm-hmm.
this was going to come out at a congressional hearing, and
Yeah.
et cetera, et cetera.
And you were happy to confirm the veracity for yourselves, and you're happy to say that as far as you're concerned, that's a real program in the government.
Yes, as far
Yeah.
as we know, it is a real program. By the way, it was never denied at the hearing. It was never
Yeah.
challenged, and it was not challenged after the hearing. I mean, you always have to be aware of hoaxes in this business, as you know. There's a lot of information floating around, and the internet is really the Wild West. So
Yeah.
there's all kinds of stories, and you have to take them one by one and try to confirm them, and not assume that everything that comes out is real.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so it's a struggle, and I think that's what differentiates solid reporting, which we're proud to cop to Leslie and I, from some of the other stuff. There's a lot of speculation out
Mm-hmm.
there, and when they asked Lue and others at the hearing to speculate, where do these UAP come from? Who's behind the wheel? What do you think they are? They were very cautious about
Mm-hmm.
that. I think we all have to be, and not jump to conclusions. So I think all we can say is, what we don't know, and take it, step by step, confirm each thing, because that's what brings credibility.
Yeah. Yeah, they were definitely cautious, although it was great to finally hear Lue on the record under oath saying that, yeah, he believes that these are some kind of higher non-human intelligence, essentially. Obviously, it feels different under oath in that kind of setting to, when he's said it previously in interviews and things like that. The report, you've read the report, the Immaculate Constellation report. Is there anything you can say about the program itself or the report for people that might not have read it and might not be as aware? Just anything that maybe stands out to you or things that you think are really important for people to know?
Well, it's I think a 14-page report. It's kind of
12, I
jargon.
think.
Say, 12 page.
I think so, yeah. I read it
Yeah,
yesterday.
I didn't count it, but the pages weren't numbered. And by the way, there were no identifying marks on the report. This is one of the problems
Yeah.
in this field. And often I found in my UFO reporting, you often come across a document that either has misleading identification on it or lacks identification.
Hmm.
So it's not as if it told us, who the author was, or any, other identifying information. Um, but um, a bunch of things jumped out at me that were interesting. I mean, there were references to quite a few incidents, encounters between Navy jets and these objects.
Hmm.
So, and there was some interesting details that the shapes of these objects, the most common were the spheroids,
Hmm.
the spherical
Orbs.
ones. The rarest were the triangles and other things. So, um, uh, you know, there was a lot of interesting information about marine encounters, objects entering and exiting the water,
Yeah.
which is really interesting. Tim Gallaudet, one of the witnesses, really has spoken out about this, and he's an admiral, so he knows about Navy encounters. So that was particularly interesting.
Mm.
So there was a lot of interesting stuff in the report, and it makes you hunger for more. I mean,
Yeah.
interestingly enough, it referenced thousands of other encounters, which have never been shared with the
Yeah.
public. Uh, the New York Times, put out 3 videos, as you know, in connection with our reporting, which caused a lot of interest at the Times. They still put up a lot, the Go Fast videos and the others, but they're pretty primitive in terms of
Mhm.
what the government actually has captured since then,
Yeah.
or before then, but never put out. Um, so there are, according to the report, there are hundreds of these videos and sightings that have been documented that really confirm what the government now acknowledges were that these objects are real. We don't know
Hmm.
where they come from or what they're doing here or why, who's behind the wheel, what, if anything, intelligent is involved, but they certainly exist. So that's quite a revelation.
Yeah. Yeah, you said it made us kind of hungry for more. Definitely starving, famished. Like in that report, it was so much, but then you just want more. As you say, you want to hear from the witnesses of those incredible UAP events
Right.
that were mentioned in there, and we want to read all the reports because the whole thing was compiled based on I think like UAP interactions with the military, right, and with intelligence
Yeah.
officials. One thing in the report, or one of the things in the report that stood out to me was it talked about reproduction vehicles, and it talked about including a triangle UAP ARV. What did you make of that? Have you heard again that from your other sources? Have you heard the idea of reproduction vehicles that we've successfully reverse engineered from non-human craft?
Well, um, I've heard, we've all heard these stories. Grusch, referred to them. Elizondo said he could provide Congress in closed session, and Grusch said this, I believe, too, with the locations of some of these recovered objects, which we supposedly have, somebody in the government has, or maybe private contractors working with the government have. Um, it wasn't completely new to me. It adds to the body of evidence or
Mm-hmm.
testimony that these things have been recovered, that they're being, reverse engineered. Um, so that's quite interesting. Obviously, what would change the dynamic is to make public, one of these things in custody, and show it to the world. But I don't think that's going to happen, not for a while.
Yeah. But again, just to clarify that, do you from speaking to your sources, do you think that we or do they seem to be under the impression or awareness that we have reproduced one to have these like reproduction vehicles that are made by human hands based on the craft from somewhere else, seemingly?
Um, I don't know if I can go that far based on my information that we've gathered, but
Mm-hmm.
certainly there have been enough hints from Lue Elizondo and others and Grusch that these objects are in in the hands of certain government programs and
Mm.
and private contractors.
Yeah.
How far they've gotten with reverse engineering these. I mean, there has been reporting to suggest that some of the um, more avant-garde weapon systems are based on research conducted by private contractors and secret government programs. Um, um, uh, uh, Implementing some of this technology. Let's put it that way.
Yeah.
But as far as I know, we've been told, Leslie and I have been told that the government, secret government programs, have not been able to successfully reverse engineer a craft
Mm.
or understand this technology at all, what the power source might be, or how mind body control might affect the aviation or flying of these objects, etc. I don't think from what we've been able to find out that the United States has successfully mastered that technology, or even any other country. So I would be very wary of reports that these reproduction vehicles are flying around.
Yeah.
Again, you have to take it one step at a time. We know that the objects are up there. They're not ours, by the way. That came out at the hearing. It comes up again and again. How do you know that these are not secret American technology or secret Russian or Chinese? And all the experts say that their capabilities way beyond anything known on Earth. By the way, one of the things Lue Elizondo testified to is interesting. He said the G-force, gravity force on
Yeah.
pilots is obviously a big concern in the design of our aircraft, our jet aircraft. And normally, human beings, pilots, can withstand several Gs, maybe extreme limits, maybe 10 Gs, 12 Gs, but these craft exhibit capabilities of thousands of Gs. So no human body could be known to withstand that. So maybe they're piloted by robotics or something, but
Hmm.
it really challenges the definition of life as we know it, because the ability of these craft to stop on a dime and change direction, and then speed off at unimaginable, speeds, raises a question of what kind of life form could withstand, that G pressure.
Yeah.
So, that's one of the many mysteries, and Lue did talk about that.
Yeah. Or are they not feeling the G's because of how it works, or is
Well,
it the skin of the craft? Is so one of those. Yeah.
that's one of the,
Options.
as you get into this, the weeds and these encounters. There's some testimony suggesting that witness observations suggesting that these things travel in some kind of bubble,
Mm.
um, and maybe that counteracts the G-force. Maybe it's an anti-gravity system that's operating within this bubble, which could explain that. But
Yeah.
again, it's speculation.
Yeah. One of the other things I found interesting in the Immaculate Constellation report, and I think it was also kind of hinted at in the hearing. I think it was just after Lue talked about those G forces and that kind of thing. I think it was Luna, Representative Luna, that asked him about whether these craft, any of them were alive or something along those lines. And in the report, it mentions shape-shifting UAPs and irregular or organic UAPs. And so again, I wondered what your thoughts were, or what you make of the idea of potentially some organic UAP. Like, what do we do with that?
Wow. Wow. Yeah. Whenever you think you've heard the ultimate in this business,
Right.
something else comes along and just blows your mind. So one
Yeah.
of the forms of these, UAPs that were discussed in the report was something like a floating brain with,
Mm-hmm.
tendrils like coming off it.
Yeah.
Um, and they're suggesting maybe there's some organic aspect to this. Yeah, I don't know what to make of it. I mean, all you can say is that these things have been observed. I mean, Dave Fravor talked in the Grusch hearing about the Tic Tac form. Looked like a propane tank or a Tic Tac, lozenge,
Mm-hmm.
with no visible wings or tail or means of propulsion, no aerodynamic surfaces that we can understand. And everyone thought, well, that's pretty weird. And then Grusch testified to an encounter involving a cube, a sphere with a cube inside, and all the points of the cube touching the inside skin of the sphere. And he talked about Grusch did about meeting a pilot afterwards who was completely freaked out having seen this thing. Again, what do you make of that? I mean, it doesn't, comport with anything we understand. And the old idea of a alien spaceship being a flying saucer or so is that's not that simple. They're taking all these other forms, and again, all we know is that this is what's been seen or captured by sophisticated photography, which has not been shared with the public. So that's interesting. But again, you can't dismiss it because this has been captured by technology. It's been eyeballed by our best observers, Navy pilots, who are not insane because they're operating these craft. They're not hallucinating because we trust them with the most sophisticated equipment we have. So all you're left with is their accounts. I saw this and I can't explain it. So that's where we're left. But it takes, the report that Shellenberger introduced, as you said, is quite detailed on the different forms of these craft. The spheres are the most common. The triangles are among the rarest, and then there are these, brain-like things that are completely weird.
Mm. And we have the word organic mentioned with it without much more information to back that up. So it's like obviously leaves us wondering, and as always, it creates way more questions than it
Absolutely.
answers. As always.
Absolutely.
Other than the things I've kind of mentioned or whatever you've mentioned already regarding this hearing, is there anything else that maybe we haven't discussed that was an interesting takeaway for you, or something that we've learnt, or what have you?
Well, I'm looking down my notes. Um, Michael Gold, one of the other witnesses who had a background from NASA,
Mm-hmm.
did spend some time saying, well, NASA is an interesting factor in this equation because for years NASA took no part in the discussion, like they didn't want to be tainted by,
Yeah.
UFO, by the whole field of UFO studies. But now, under former Congressman Nelson, NASA is taking a part, which is interesting. And Gold said at the hearing that NASA has this amazing database.
Mm.
I mean, they're up there with the space stations. And what information is the space station capturing up there that we don't know about? And he said there's huge reams of databases of information that needs to be scrubbed to see what NASA has detected. So that's an interesting aspect. And to get NASA on board, I mean, one of the things that came out at the hearing was that the government has never taken this thing seriously, this
Mm-hmm.
phenomenon. And now is the time to break through and to share or what can be shared, and at least for Congress to be informed. Because one of the things that came out again in the hearing is that Congress has been criminally, one of the witnesses said, criminally denied information. Congress has a role in approving, obviously, budgets, and it has a right to know, an obligation, responsibility to know about U.S. government programs that are spending taxpayers' money. So, but this information has been not only withheld from Congress, but Congress has been lied to. That was cited in the report. that in various briefings of members of Congress, false information was deliberately put out, denying certain programs. And Congress is entitled to information, even if it's not public, is entitled to, members of Congress are cleared to know the deepest secrets that exist. And that information was denied to Congress. That came out at various hearings. So that jumped out at me. That again, AARO, which was the all domain
Anomaly resolution
the
office.
latest, the latest entity of all these agencies that they used to be called, UFO,
AIMSOG and
UAP. Now they're going to all domain because, we got to deal with the oceans
right.
too.
Yeah.
So, and AARO, that's another thing that came out of me. Tim Gallaudet, the admiral who testified, said that he was subject to some pressure campaign by AARO to basically turn him away from asking questions about things that information he picked up from Navy colleagues about encounters, including underwater encounters. So it was another, it was further information, further confirmation that the government has not been straight with us.
Yeah. Whole thing is so frustrating, isn't it? Hopefully we're going to get there. We are making progress. We're definitely making progress. What happens next, Ralph? Where do we go from here? Do you think there's going to be another hearing soon?
There is, or there's going to be a Senate hearing, which could be interesting.
When do you expect that might be?
It's supposedly soon, maybe December. There are other whistleblowers who are afraid to come forward. Grusch was subject to retaliation. He testified. Lue was subject to retaliation. One of the things that came out at the hearing was interesting is Lue said he found out that the Pentagon has some kind of a psyops person working in the information office. And they did try to paint him as an enemy. There was a lot of negative information given out about him, leaked about him, and he had a lawsuit against the government on that account. We need to know more about government programs. And now there's a new head of AARO. There was some confidence voiced at the hearing that there may be a new direction that the government is taking in terms of, candor, transparency. No one is expecting all the secrets to be revealed because there are legitimate national security implications. Everyone knows that. We're grown up, we understand that. The idea of full disclosure coming out, it's not going to happen. There's too much involved in national security and defense programs. Look, we are in an arms race. Witnesses have said that again and again at the hearings with our adversaries, our earthly adversaries, and not to speak of the cosmological adversaries that may be out there. But we're in an arms race for this technology. Whoever can figure out the power source or a power source that is, giving power to these objects, enabling them to operate either interdimensionally or at vast distances, in traversing the universe, obviously would control the world, our world. So there is a legitimate, national security interest in not keeping keeping some secrets, but other information seems to deserve sharing with all of humanity because we're all common, occupiers of this planet, and all these things have. But it's not a American phenomenon. Obviously, UFO encounters. It's around the world, and I wrote about this in my book on John Mack. He went all over the world tracing these encounters in Brazil and Australia and Africa and Harare and all these places where people all reported the same things: encounters with strange craft and sometimes strange beings. So this is the common property of humanity, and we deserve to know what's going on to the extent that it can be shared.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I know this question is probably one that you won't have a lot to say on, but just in case, I'll ask you. Are you aware of any new kind of whistleblowers or new people that are in government or were in government that are going to be going public to share what they're aware of? Are you aware of any new names that we're going to be, or not that I'm asking for the name, are we going to hear from anybody soon in the coming
Well,
months?
I'm aware that there are people out there who have information, which would be very interesting. But they're not ready to come forward, just like the person who wrote the report that Michael Shellenberger referenced at the hearing. They're very afraid because the government has a history of retaliating, despite the whistleblower statutes, which are supposed to protect people with this information. The whistleblower statute that was passed by Congress and signed into law provides a whole mechanism for revealing information important about UAP programs that exist, material recovery programs, possible recovery of bodies, alien biologics, etc. The statute doesn't say that whistleblowers have a right to go on, TV and announce everything they know. It provides a very secure mechanism for them to give the information to responsible members of Congress in secure facilities, etc. But even that rigid protocol was violated, according to Grusch and Lue and others, by retaliatory measures by the government. So it's understandable why a whole number of whistleblowers who have information are reluctant to come forward. Lue said that he wrote this in his book. There were orbs in his house. I'm not saying they were unleashed by the government, but and Grusch said that people have been killed actually with information. He was asked, when he said that, killed by the government or killed by aliens, and he said both. This was an open testimony to Congress, so it's understandable that whistleblowers are concerned. And we, Leslie and I, have spoken to people who have information, and they're not going to come forward, not yet. So to answer your question, yeah, we're aware of people, but we're a long way from them going public.
Yeah. Well, it's just, it's frustrating, and hopefully the not yet ends up being the important thing, and hopefully at some point in the future they do feel comfortable or things change sufficiently that they feel able to step forward. If only maybe everybody would do it all at once, then maybe it would be harder for the government to retaliate in a sense. But yeah, you mentioned Lue's book, Imminent, Inside the Pentagon's Hunt for UFOs. Let's talk a bit about that. I've got a few questions about it for you. Unless there's anything else you wanted to say about the hearing first.
No, I mean, your questions are very good, and they prompt there was a lot of material given out at the hearings, a lot of information. So it's hard to recap it without specific questions. So, if I'm prompted, I'll remember something that happened at the hearing. But I think it did move the ball forward. And I think that's an important point you touched on, that we're certainly not at the goal line, but we know a lot more than we did a few years ago. When I did my book on John Mack, it came out in 2017, in 2021, and the story in the New York Times came out in 2017. We knew a lot less than we know now. The government is now saying that these things are real. I mean, that is a big breakthrough in my view. From the days when the government said you're hallucinating, or they got the Disney company to to help the propaganda, that people who saw UFOs were crazy.
Yeah.
So no one was talking about it, or they were afraid to talk about it. So we have come a long way, and I think that's an important point, that people who are advocating for, immediate disclosure, I think are, a little bit naive maybe, because it ain't going to happen immediately, but it's going to happen little by little, and maybe there'll be a tipping point where a lot more will come out.
Yeah.
Uh, but so I do take comfort from the fact that we have come a considerable way.
Yeah. Yeah, awesome. And hopefully, I mean, I think we're in the middle of it right now, right? That process, and hopefully it just carries on gaining pace. Regarding Lue's book, before I ask you maybe my specific questions about things that kind of caught my eye, was there anything that burns that you want to say? Anything that you really want to get off your chest that you
Well,
found
Lue
interesting or
has,
takeaways?
yeah, now Lue has been through a lot,
Yeah.
and he's been subject to a disinformation campaign from elements in the government that have been very stressful, I know, for him. I think he's a very brave, courageous figure who has really moved,
Yeah.
the ball forward. Um, Leslie and I broke the story of his book, at least the details, in the New York Times. We had an advance copy, and he did say quite a number of, look, he's under great constraints. He's not going to violate his national security oath. There's a lot of things he's not saying, and a lot of things he didn't say at the hearing. He said he would tell Congress in private executive session in a skiff and whatever. Um, and in the book, which was approved, by the way, by the Pentagon, in terms of what he was able to disclose, he says that there's a lot of information he cannot share. So to his credit, he's not violating his oath to protect, national security information. But what he did say, and what the government allowed him to say or didn't block him from saying, was really quite extraordinary. He said, for
Yeah.
example, that he handled implants.
Yeah.
Um, so the whole question of whether, people have gotten alien implants, it's still a very controversial area. It's not been thoroughly vetted by the scientific community for sure. But, people have said over many years that they were, abducted by alien beings and put aboard a spacecraft and implanted with various, secret sensors in different parts of their body.
Mhm.
Um, and no one, to my knowledge, has come forward with irrefutable proof that that's true. But Lue said in his book that he examined this phenomenon of implants and handled some of them, and they seem to have they seem to have some kind of organic properties that enable them to kind of meld with the body and evade detection. They moved
Mm.
around on their own. They moved around in the body to evade detection. They seemed to move when they were taken out of the body. Now, that's really interesting. He couldn't say too much about that, but that he did say. And
Yeah.
uh, and he did seem to give some credence to the accounts that alien bodies, biologics, have been recovered along with material recoveries
Yeah.
of downed craft. Again, he couched that in his book as saying it came from other people, and he didn't give any details for sure, and there were no photos. But that jumped out at us as probably the leads of the story.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I had that written down here as one of my next questions to ask you about, because again, that jumped out at me, the stuff you said about implants, the fact that you even got a couple of pages to it, and like the way you described them, like that they seem to be almost alive, like moving around. It's kind of like we come back to that organic UAPs, right? It's like, is this like organic implants in a sense? And as you say, avoid detection, and they kind of like are able to almost move to get away from the scalpel or whatever
Right.
it was. It was the thing that was trying to get them out, and the idea that they still move around in this petri dish and all that kind of thing. So
Yeah, that
fascinating.
was
And
really creepy.
avoid
That
Super
was
creepy and
super
bizarre, and
creepy.
yeah, and like they're able to avoid setting off any kind of immune response in the body, which even a little splinter kind of gives you, like,
Well, in
redness and swelling. And
Whitley Strieber has written about that a lot. He said he had implants, and in my John Mack book, I
mm,
describe a situation where um, somebody came to John Mack, who was a psychiatrist at Harvard, who got very interested in the whole UFO thing because so many people were coming forward and telling him about their abduction experiences, and he couldn't find out um, any reason why they were crazy or hallucinating or making it up. So anyway, I describe, and he described the case of a guy who had an implant, or felt he had an implant, and it was removed from his body and analyzed. And the outcome was, the decision was that this was some organic part of his own body. Uh,
yeah.
it wasn't an implant after all. And that, I mean, surprised him. It surprised everybody who analyzed it, but they could not find a a non-conventional explanation for this implant. They ended up saying, well, it seems to be part of his own body. Um, so there you go. I mean, this phenomenon, whatever it is, does not want to be found out.
Mm,
Um, that's one of the takeaways from this whole field, that people say, well, why don't they just land on the White House lawn and announce themselves? Well, they don't want to announce, whoever they are,
too easy.
or don't want to announce themselves. They don't want to be identified, at least not openly like that.
Yeah.
They play cat and mouse games with detection, but it does not want to be identified easily. It
Mm,
doesn't lend itself to being photographed, whatever it is. People have set up, cameras to try to catch them at night coming into, I've been abducted so many times, they say. And so I set up a hidden camera, the motion, detection activated. And in the end, it doesn't capture anything.
yeah.
So that's part of the same mystery.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. A couple of words, just a couple of last words on the implant stuff. Did the stuff that you read in Lue's book resonate with anything that other than what you've mentioned, resonate with much that you came across in John Mack's archives and things like that? Like, did he have many other descriptions of the way they moved, like the way Lue described them and things like that? Again, just in a brief answer, if possible.
Yeah, he didn't have the same detail that Lue had about that, but he certainly had cases of people telling him about implants, and he was unable to look. John Mack was a psychiatrist.
Yeah.
That was interesting. That limited him. He was not a neurologist, like other people in
Hmm.
the field. There were limits to what he could, investigate. And it's interesting because that came up at Harvard. He was hauled before an investigating committee at Harvard to see whether he was, hurting Harvard's reputation by propounding all these theories, or at least, investigating. And he had to admit he didn't have the tools to investigate, the ultimate truth or falsity of this information. All he could do was operate on the grounds that he knew, which was psychiatry, and there was no reason these people were making it up or hallucinating. Or so he came to the conclusion that somehow these things happened, these
Mm.
crazy things that people were talking about happened. We don't know how, but that's really what we're left with. So to answer your question, John Mack did not have the technical expertise that Lue was able to draw on in investigating these implants, but he was very well aware of them.
Yeah. Yeah. I found it pretty interesting in Lue's book when I read that Monsanto, the name Monsanto. I was like, oh, that's interesting. And allegedly involved in dealing with non-human biological specimens in some way or another. I guess I want to ask your thoughts on that, but more importantly, have you ever heard that from any of your sources? either prior to or
We,
after
yeah.
reading that?
Well, we spent some time, Leslie Kane and I, looking into private contractors and their possible role in this whole field. And we came across a whole number of names of companies, mostly aerospace companies, but others. Um, and what makes it particularly difficult to pursue that is that these private companies are not amenable to the Freedom of Information Act.
Mm.
So whereas you could send a FOIA request to a government agency and they probably will put you off, as they often do, saying that it's classified or they don't have information, et cetera. There's at least they are required by law to respond and to really search their files and to provide information if they can legally.
Yeah.
Private companies don't have that obligation. So, and that's probably the reason the government has been dealing with private contractors for so long, that they're shielded from disclosure. Plus, they have the expertise and the money, private money, to research these areas. So we did come across a lot of information suggesting that private contractors were involved in this work. But as difficult as it is to deal with secret government programs, it's infinitely more difficult to deal with private contractors because they don't have any obligation to talk to you.
Yeah.
So there you are. It does comport with stuff we had heard and try to check out, but at this point, there's no way to do that.
Yeah. Fascinating. Were there any other companies that you would be able to name now that you found interesting, when you were looking into that? Not necessarily that you have a concrete link, but a company that you found there's a lot of smoke there, and maybe it's not a weapons company or kind of a company like Monsanto, like a little bit different in this sense. Was there anything else like that?
Well, Lockheed keeps coming up, Lockheed Martin,
Mm-hmm.
and McDonnell Douglas, a lot of the big defense contractors. And there's been some reporting on Lockheed. Um, but again, you come across this locked door that you can't penetrate. And,
Yeah. Yeah.
and also there's very few people, this is a point probably worth making, that in the government and in private industry, this information is very, very closely held. This is not, widely dispersed among intelligence agencies. It's not like the CIA knows all this stuff or NSA.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and Lockheed and McDonnell Douglas and Monsanto and the other companies that may be involved in some of this research. This is not something that's shared around the whole company. There's very few people who are involved in this. So a lot of people don't know. And if you ask them, like you ask the Pentagon spokesperson, does this program exist? The person will say, no, it doesn't exist. Well, this person doesn't know because he or she is not read into the
Yeah.
the stovepiped, top secret, highly classified program. So it's very, very, very closely held. So
Yeah.
you can't just go to Lockheed and say, oh, by the way, are you doing, do you have a UFO? Anyway, that would be naive. So
Yeah.
the hard thing would be to penetrate this. And I guess the next step will be to find uh, one of these craft if it's being held anywhere in the government. And Lue and Grusch have offered to show the government where these things are being held, and that's what I'd like to see. Somebody in the government say, "Yeah, we found out and we checked it out and we got in and we saw it." And maybe I don't know whether we'll ever see pictures of these things that are supposedly held, but that would be the next step.
Yeah. Yeah, that would be awesome. In Imminent, Lue says that he told a liaison to the Secretary of Defense that, and I quote, "Time is not on our side. We have to take action." So I guess I want to ask you briefly, like, if if they've been here for a long time, which I think most of us seem to agree on, if there's something here, it's probably been here for a long time. Why would time not be on our side? And kind of part B to that is, what actions do you think Lue is alluding to there? If you have,
Well, Lue in the book takes a kind of a very alarmist view of what this all amounts to. He sees this, as he says in the book, as preparation of the battlefield. that these forces, these alien forces, are not necessarily out to do us any good. They are investigating the Earth and human beings for some purpose, which we don't understand. And he thinks that there's a great danger to humanity. So that's why I think he says time is not on our side. Um, I mean, it's impossible to know what the purpose of these visitations are, if these things have been coming here for a long time. Um, and these abductions, which have been taking place, so many people say they feel they've been abducted, but again, it's hard to confirm scientifically. Um, but what does it all amount to? And Lue, whatever he knows, I mean, he's not sharing everything he knows. Um, but he says that he has a very uneasy feeling about what this all amounts to, and and that there is a great danger to humanity. And anytime the government can't, the military can't figure out an adversary or potential adversary, why are all these things focusing on military sites? That's something that came up at the hearing, by the way, Ben. That's interesting. One of the questions was, a lot of these objects have been recorded showing interest in nuclear sites and military sites. And one of the questions was, is this because whatever they are more interested in our military sites, or the military sites have better surveillance and detection? And nobody can answer that question because we don't have the whole, database. But certainly there has been a lot of reporting around the fact that these things have been interacting and focusing on sensitive sites, and not just in the US, but apparently in China and Russia as well. So what does that mean? Are they looking to disarm our nuclear capabilities for whatever reason? Are they curious about what we know? It's hard to imagine that there's anything that we know more than they know, because they're moving around in these amazing, craft. But what is it that they're after? Are they trying to save humanity by disarming nuclear weapons? Well, it didn't work in Hiroshima and Nagasaki, right? If they were out to prevent nuclear detonations, they either didn't want to or couldn't at that time. What's this all about? But there is definitely, that came up again and again at the hearing. What is the interest of these objects in sensitive military sites? And no one has the answer.
No. And I think they asked Lue, like, if he thinks it is, because we have more cameras and more surveillance at these sites, or if it is that they are particularly interested. And I think Lue is the only one of the witnesses maybe to kind of go on that bit of a limb and say, no, I'm pretty sure they are interested in these sites, rather than just having more surveillance equipment and all that kind of thing. And also, when you were talking, you reminded me of something Lue said years ago in like a podcast or something like that, where he said maybe it was like his closing words or something, and it was just, just spend time with your family and your friends and your loved ones, and kind of that, again, that kind of ominous, sentiment coming through. You mentioned Lue kind of has that kind of alarming, in a sense, view of it, or at least that's what he's presenting. Maybe that's the way he feels he's going to get the ball moving. He also maybe is having that kind of mentality because people have said stuff to him that feel kind of alarming. And one thing I'm thinking of is in the book, he says that a person highly placed in the US government, a person who knew the truth the US government had hidden all of these years, told him that he was unwise in his mission regarding UAP. Like, this guy told Lue that Lue was unwise in his mission regarding UAP. They said that by talking about this issue so openly, Lue is accelerating the chances that we will be invaded. Now, obviously that is alarming. There's a lot of things. What do you think? Like, why do you think Lue talking about the issue so openly could accelerate the chances that we would be invaded? Do you have any thoughts on that?
No, but I know that Lue has had encounters with people in the Pentagon who felt that there was a demonic aspect to these craft, and that's one reason why some people didn't want him pursuing UFO research, because he was tapping into some really bizarre demonic aspect of this. Now, whether it
Yeah.
would invite an invasion, I can't, who knows, but he did say that in the book. You're absolutely right. And there was some concern that by flagging, naming that, them as some kind of enemy, he was hastening some kind of hostile action. I mean, who
Mm.
knows? But again, you always have to ask yourself, what does Lue know that he's not saying? Because there's a lot he can't talk about. And, you can assume he knows more than he's saying. That's for sure, because
Yeah.
he only got clearance to talk about a little bit of his information. So what what information is there, and what information does Congress have available to it, or what information has Congress already heard from
Hmm.
whistleblowers that they have not shared with the American people? I mean, you can speculate that it's a lot, that there's a lot of
Yeah.
information that's very alarming that has not been shared. And maybe some of it will come out in hearings, but um,
Yeah.
it's impossible to know. But it's certainly very worrisome to think
Mm.
that there's a lot of information that we're not
Yeah.
getting access to that could put this in a whole new light.
Yeah, exactly. And if the person that said this to Lue is truly as he described, he said a person who knew the truth the US government had hidden all these years, like that is kind of alarming. If somebody that knows way more than even the people that we look at for answers like Lue, if he knows more than that and he's saying that, and then you go into hyper speculation mode, and I'm thinking, Grusch alluded to potential agreements with non-humans, and then it's like, okay, so is there some kind of agreement where we've agreed to let them, observe us, maybe take some of us if they, and in exchange we don't tell the masses about their, that they're here. In exchange, they don't just kill us all or whatever. Hyper speculation, as I say, but yeah, it's kind of a bit worrying. That have you ever heard anything similar from your sources? It's similarly alarming, like
Well,
in the sense of
you know, um, it's very important to take this one step at a time, take a deep breath, because once you go down this path, you're familiar, I'm sure, with the stories that came
yeah.
out after the 50s, that President Eisenhower was dealing with an alien
Mm.
group, and that we have an agreement that humans will spend time on the alien planet and the aliens will help us work on secret
I've
tech.
heard of it. Haven't gone down the rabbit hole, but I'm aware of
Well,
it.
that's one of the stories around, and Majestic 12, etc. And as I said, it's very important to go step by step and to really uh, put our faith in information that we can verify, even if it's unsatisfying at first to
Yeah.
be so limiting. But there's a lot of really wild stuff out there. And what one story, which is that we've been cooperating with aliens all along. Now, as a mainstream reporter, and I always try to ground my reporting from my books and my New York Times stories and freelance stories in what we can verify, and at least what we can attribute to a named person who will stand behind the information with his or her name, and we can
Hmm.
look at their credentials for saying this. That's why we put faith in Lue and Tim Gallaudet and others who have attached their names and reputations to information, and that's very important. So I prefer not to spend a lot of time thinking about all these, wild ramifications, stories that are
Hmm.
out there, and only focus step by step on what we can confirm, because not everything that is said or hypothesized about is true.
No, of
It
course not.
may be, we have to ground ourselves in information we can
Mm.
verify, and only and be careful to report only as much as we know. And at least if we mention other possibilities, we say there is no confirmation of that, or this is pure speculation. But you know,
Hmm.
but the reason I think our 2017 story held up so well wasn't perfect. I mean, there are things like, OSAP preceded ATIP, and, we didn't really spell that out in great detail. There wasn't much room to do that. But anyway, the reason the story held up so well is that we were very careful to report on what we knew, that the Pentagon had a secret UFO program, that Lue quit because he wasn't being supported, and that the government had spent $22 million on this secret program, and a lot of it went to Bigelow. So we reported those facts, and those facts have stood up. And I think that is not a requirement and a goal for other reporting in this field, to stick to what we know, or at least what people are willing to stand behind with their names. There's a lot of unnamed people who happy to say stuff, and other reporters who will print that. But we've been very meticulous in identifying our sources and not taking information from unnamed sources. So I think that's important. And we lose some of the stories, obviously, that are more sensational, but I think it puts us on a better ground.
Yeah, no, agreed. In just a kind of one-word answer, just to clarify, you haven't had one of your sources say anything akin to what that person said to Lue, like anything quite alarming in the sense of talking about this, publishing articles about this? No, could be a bad thing. No. Last thing I'm going to ask you from Lue's book is, he said, and I quote, bottom line, time is stranger than we imagine and may be key to the UAP mystery. Do you have anything to say on that? Any thoughts on that?
The whole thing is stranger than anything we know. I mean, it keeps getting stranger, just like we were talking about the shapes of these craft. If you said, okay, everyone can picture a flying saucer. Okay, they can imagine a flying saucer going through space. But what if it's not just a flying saucer? What if it's a triangle? What if it's something that shifts shape? What if it's a sphere
floating brain
with a cube inside? What if it goes in the water? And it goes in the water, not at speeds we can understand in the water, but at 700 miles an hour underwater. Now, no one can imagine an object reaching that incredible speed underwater, because water is solid and nothing can pass through water at 700 miles an hour. Well, these things do, apparently. Maybe they create some kind of bubble, that enables them to operate without the physical limitations we now understand about water. So everything you hear about becomes stranger and stranger, and the water thing is particularly extraordinary. That now, witnesses have talked about these objects appearing, going into the water and emerging from the water. So. So that's what I say, that each step takes us, into weirder and weirder territory.
Yeah. But with you looking into John Mack's work in depth and everything like that, I'm sure you would agree with the statement that time is stranger. It may be more mysterious, or however Lue said it. Time is stranger than we imagine. I'm sure you'd agree with that. And as you say, reality.
Grappled with what is time? What is time?
Yeah.
Time changes whether you're on Earth or another planet. How about that? Time is affected by gravity. Time is time warped.
I just did an interview with them.
But when you read the stories by people who are interested in physics, string theory and all this very, very weird stuff, dimensional theory. First of all, our understanding of physics is in its infancy. I mean, let's face it. What we learned in the last few decades is really fascinating. But if you project that into the next few decades, what are we yet to learn about black holes, etc.? So time is one of those mysteries.
Yeah, absolutely. And the more I learn, the more I realize reality itself is just far more mysterious than we think. I'm sure all of these things are going to be far more mysterious than we think. I recently interviewed a psychologist about time, the nature of time. He wrote a book on it, Time Expansion Experiences, and that was fascinating. He's talking about how he thinks the evidence suggests time is non-linear. Time is way more mysterious than we think. And so, that's super interesting. Ralph, I really appreciate your time. Before I let you go, anything else you can update us on in terms of articles you're working on, or have been working on, books that you are working on, have published recently, anything upcoming? Anything you want to make people aware of?
But I mean, look, Leslie and I continue to look for stories to write. We're keeping tabs on, different developments. This thing is moving forward. There's going to be another hearing. My wife and I wrote the book you have in your background, UFO.
Yeah.
I'm happy to put it
Which
up.
shoulder? Wrong shoulder. There you go.
It's a children's book, a nonfiction, which we're very happy to report sticks to the facts to tell kids what is happening in this realm, and it's going to be a bigger issue for the next generation.
Mm.
Because we're going to be learning more. And it's not just the stuff of science fiction and, aliens and stuff. I mean, it's real observations and disclosures coming from Congress. So how do kids process this information? And what can you believe? It's nicely illustrated by a very good artist. So that's been out. My wife is a children's book writer, so we collaborated on that. My John Mack book, continues to attract attention. I do podcasts.
Other shoulder.
The Believer, and working on different possibilities to expand the story in different media. I'm continuing to report. It's not an easy field to report in, and there's still a giggle factor. The stigma is still there that it's not a totally reputable field. And yet I think it's very important. And if you stick to what we know and what we can source, I think we're getting somewhere.
Yeah. No, I mean, I think that at this point, that's kind of beyond dispute. I think we're definitely moving forward. When you look back again to your article, you're and Leslie and your other colleague whose name is escaping
Cooper,
me. Helen Cooper. Yeah, that article, obviously everybody says it changed the game, and we can look back now and clearly see that, things are very different since then, and the developments keep getting quicker and they're bigger in a sense, and hopefully it just continues on this path at the very least, if it doesn't increase. Anyway, I really appreciate your time again, Ralph. I think you're my first guest that I've got to 4 interviews with, so that's awesome. And I think you were the only guest that I've interviewed as Unravelling the Universe that I spoke to when we were Have You Met podcast a few years ago. So you've been with us from the start. Really appreciate that, and I appreciate your time again.
Well, you're a great interviewer, Ben, and it's a pleasure to be there. And let's keep it up. We'll continue to monitor developments and beyond as the news where it takes us.
Thank you, Ralph. I really appreciate that, and I look forward to doing it again sometime. All my best.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to my conversation with Ralph Blumenthal. Please see the description for lots of links, including to Ralph's books and website. Please subscribe if you want to continue unraveling the universe with us, and if you want to support us, please be aware that you can do so via Patreon. Thank you.